Thursday, June 28th. Oh, Lord, I don't like this dead Mr. Furtz business at all. Maggie and I went over to the Furtzes today to see if we could take Kathy, Barry, and David out somewhere just to get them out of the house. About 100, well, maybe 20 relatives were swarming all over. They said Mrs. Furtz had to go pick out a coffin. Can you imagine that? With your husband dead and all, they make you go pick out a coffin? How do you do that? Is there a room with a bunch of coffins and you just choose one? Do you choose one because it's pretty or because it's sturdy and won't sort of leak? What if you don't have enough money for a good leak-proof coffin? Kathy and Barry were up in their rooms playing Monopoly with their cousins. At first, I thought it was strange that they were sitting there buying hotels and trading property when their father was dead and their mother was out shopping around for a coffin. But then I couldn't imagine what they should be doing. Maybe crying and looking at some pictures of him or something. Kathy and Barry didn't want to go anywhere because they wanted to finish Monopoly. Little David Furtz was sitting at the kitchen table, playing with some Play-Doh. When I asked him what he was making, he said, "Sort of a squirrel." I peered at it and even looked like a squirrel, so I said, "That's a great squirrel." And do you know what he said? He said, "It's for Daddy." His uncle, who was sitting at the table watching David, whispered, "He doesn't understand." Then David shouted, "I do too," and he punched the little squirrel flat and ran out of the room. Tonight, Mom said there would be a viewing of the body tomorrow night at DiMaggio's funeral home, which is about 2 blocks from our house. "Can we go?" I asked. I've never seen a body before, except on TV. Mom looked at Dad. He said, Maybe they should, Sam," my mom said. "Oh, please," said Dennis. "Well, I'm not going," said Maggie. "I want to go," said Tommy. He didn't even know where we were going. Carl Ray, of course, didn't say anything. He must have been wondering if he was still going to have a job now, with Mr. Furtz dead and all. "Well, fine then. You can come, but behave yourselves." So, we're all going tomorrow, except Maggie and Carl Ray, I guess. Beth Ann finally called. Surprise, surprise. She said she was sorry she hadn't called sooner, but she's been so busy. I didn't ask her what she was busy doing. She asked me what I was doing tomorrow night. Well, I've fallen for that one before. So I was happy that I had something to say. "Going to a funeral home," I said. I knew she'd be surprised. She wanted to know who was there, and I told her it was Mr. Furtz, our new neighbor. She asked if he was dead. Of course he was dead, I told her. I feel terrible about Mr. Furtz. I keep expecting to see him outside, puttering around his yard. I told my parents they ought to take some vitamins. Here's some Odyssey notes to take my mind off Mr. Furtz. I'll write them in red ink. Sacking cities. I tried to read the Odyssey today, but I couldn't get past the first couple of pages. Homer writes so strangely. He begins, "Tell me, O Muse, of that ingenious hero who traveled far and wide after he had sacked the famous town of Troy." Doesn't that sound like a little much? Fortunately, I knew what a muse was from English last year. A muse is a goddess who sits around inspiring people whenever she feels like it. If you're telling a story and don't feel too inspired, you're supposed to call on the muse for help. It looks like Homer needed some help right from the start. If I were Homer, I don't think I'd admit that right at the beginning of the story. And then I just can't warm right up to a character who is a hero, an ingenious hero, because he sacked a town. Lord. Homer also has a strange way of putting things. For example, instead of saying, "He visited many cities," Homer will say, "Many cities did he visit." It reminds me of the preacher at Aunt Radine's church in West Virginia. He would make his voice really soft, and then boom, he would be shouting, and then soft again. And he would say things like, "Many people did our Jesus cure," and little did he know. You could tell that this preacher really liked to talk and that he was really proud of what he said and the way he said it. Anyway, about all I could make out from the first part of the Odyssey is that it's going to be about this man Odysseus who sacked Troy and then started on his way home, but all these gods are trying to decide if they should let Odysseus get started on his journey home to his wife. Then you find out that back at his wife's house, a bunch of men are falling all over her, waiting for the opportunity to marry her. It's like a soap opera. It just kills me the way these gods decide everything. Here's this big hero, Odysseus, and everything he does is because the gods decide he should do it. I keep wondering if there are still all these gods, like Zeus and Athena and Poseidon, sitting around up there on Mount Olympus, deciding if I should go to Mr. Wirtz's funeral, or even worse, deciding when it was time for Mr. Wirtz to die. Are they saying, should Mary Lou Finney die today? Well, yes, I think she should, because many people has she slighted of late. Well, I don't agree, says another one. She's a good kid. Let us halt a while, etc. Also, I have trouble keeping track of all the names in the first 3 pages, just to give you an idea of why I have trouble. Here are the names mentioned: Hyperion, Zeus, Odysseus, Calypso, Poseidon, Ethiopians, Aegisthus, Agamemnon, Ursu, Hermes, Athena, Cronus, Atlas, Polyphemus, Cyclops, Theusa, Phorcys, Telemachus, Penelope, Mentes, Taphians. I was reading this in the living room after dinner while Carl Ray was watching TV, and I got so frustrated. I just threw the book down and said, Telemachus? Who the heck is Telemachus? Do you know what Carl Ray did? He said, without even looking away from the TV. The son of Odysseus. You could have knocked me over with a feather. And how do you know that? I asked. Simple, he said, and he kept right on watching the dating game. I didn't even think Carl Ray knew how to read.